guys, it's Mo. I wanted to do a video that isn't a glamorous video. It's nothing of a glamorous subject either. It is a video that I was inspired to tape on the spur of the moment today in regards to shadow work. So I just watched a video about shadow work, and I don't know if you guys understand what shadow work is, but I never really understood what that meant. I always thought that shadow work meant like magic work and stuff that's done like without other people seeing, kind of like quietly and without being noticed and under the shadow of the night. Like, I never really thought that shadow work was what I now have understood it to be. So I just watched a video from a woman whom I'm subscribed to her channel. Her channel's name is Fierce and Pretty. I'll put the name up on the screen if you want to go check out her video on shadow work. But she did talk a lot about what she struggled with growing up as a kid and how that affected how she reacted within relationships that she was in, and how she has learned to deal with those issues through her own means and with the help of close people that she's able to talk to when necessary. And I'm 39 years old, and I really don't know how to start talking about shadow work in my life, because I just feel like I've been through so much that really what I want to do now is just be open and honest in front of the camera. And if somebody finds this message inspirational, I'll be happy. And if it somehow opens your eyes to understand what shadow work is for you and how you can utilize shadow work to help yourself. For some reason I keep thinking about her story, and I'm trying to put my story across in a certain sense, but I keep thinking about her shadow story. And I guess I would start by saying that I really have a hard time knowing where to start, but I guess if I started at the very beginning, I would say that I don't really remember my childhood. I remember certain parts of my childhood very vividly, but there's so much that I've forgotten about, and I don't want to spread false information based on my childhood. So I guess I'll just say that the moments that I remembered within my childhood were moments where I can look back at them now and realize that I've always been the person that I am now. That little girl that I was when I was 5 or 6 years old has been the same girl within my heart up until this age that I am now, 39 years old. So I was born on January 22nd, 1981, and I was born in Montreal, and I remember being a very sensitive child, sensitive to just being afraid of going to bed at night and thinking that somebody might break into my house where we were living in NDG and not steal anything but murder my family. And I know that's a very dark thought for someone to have at 6 years old, but I do remember being so scared that I would never want to fall asleep. I would always keep my eyes open as long as possible, just in case somebody broke into my house, I could defend my family. And so I guess if I had to express what that was like now back then, I would say that I was really being tortured mentally by some sort of darkness within me, and feeling like that was portrayed in me being afraid of something exterior coming in. So I do remember when I was 5 or 6 years old, or maybe 7, I did get a pumpkin plant, and I remember really loving my pumpkin plant. And I remember I was a child that was very quiet, but I would walk around on the road and I would take bugs that had been squashed caterpillars off the road, and I would pick them up with a stick and I would put them on the grass so they could, I suppose, rest in peace. I'd have to say that's what the purpose was of it. Now I don't know why I did it when I was a child, but that's the kind of sensitive heart that I had when I was a child. And growing up, I really experienced a lot of things that hardened my heart and put a lot of thickness on the skin of my heart. And I kind of forgot about the child that I was when I was super sensitive. And I remember one time I stole a shirt from somebody's locker at the pool, and I hid it in the backyard under the earth. I dug a hole in the earth to hide the stolen shirt so that nobody would ask me where I had gotten it and I wouldn't have to confess to having stolen it. And I also remember stealing a Barbie doll from a friend on the bus. And so it's funny how I remember these certain moments growing up. And I remember also in the courtyard, me and my girlfriend, I would only ever really have one best friend at a time, and that best friend would be the only friend that I would ever spend time with. And we're talking about like 13 years old and under. I used to play with milkweeds. I used to put the milkweeds in their little husk, and I used to pretend they were babies. And I played with Barbies until I was 13 years old. I used to talk to the ants when I was about 10 years old. I used to sit on the curb outside of my house in the front yard, and I used to just sit with the ants, and sometimes I would converse and talk out loud to myself in the hopes that the ants were listening. I guess I've always really had a childlike heart, and so when I grew into a teenager, I guess like anybody, I enjoyed my breakups in certain relationships. It's hard when you get into your first relationship and you fall in love with that first person that you want to be the one, and they end up breaking up with you, and you beg them to stay with you and not break up with you, and they do anyways, and that caused a lot of pain, but it's nothing unlike anyone else has ever endured. I mean, heartbreak is something that's very general. Most people go through it. But I think when I got into my 20s, I kind of feel like I was a delinquent because I never really finished anything as far as school went besides high school. And I always felt like looking back in my late 20s, I always thought I've never finished anything ever in my life as far as education goes, and I really should do that. But going back into my early 20s, it's when I started to look into astrology, and I was working at a job in a warehouse, and a gentleman there, I'll never forget him, his name was Benjamin. He used to call me Snow White because I have very pale skin and my hair is naturally dark brown, so I guess it looked black to him, and he would call me Snow White. And he suggested to me that I buy a tarot deck, and that if I drew the cards for myself, he would read them for me if I wrote down what they were on a piece of paper and in what order they were in and what spread. And I didn't know anything about tarot, but for some reason, all I know is that I went out and I must have purchased a pack of tarot cards because I did do the spread, and I showed him the spread, and I remember I got the Lover's card. And all throughout my life, I've grown up in a Christian family, so imagine that, my parents would have Bible studies in the living room, every evening, and they would write a Bible verse on the board, and they would have us memorize the Bible verse word by word so that we'd read the Bible verse, and my dad would erase a word, and then we'd do the Bible verse again, and then he'd erase another word until there was no words left, and we would be saying the Bible verse. So I come from a large family. I'm the oldest of 7, and I never had a problem with growing up Christian, but I did go through my rebellious stages, because I remember my first boyfriend, my first love, told me that he broke up with me because God wanted him to be a singer in a band. And he was a Christian guy, and he didn't act like a Christian at all. He didn't believe in saving sex before marriage or anything like that. So you can just imagine what that was like, even though he would always try to make me think that he was feeling guilty and he wanted to stop. So he did say that he was told from God that he needed to break up with me because he needed to start a band and be a singer in a band. So I really turned against Christian men, and I really hated God at that point. And so I was still a soft-hearted person, but I just didn't want anything to do with Christian guys, because I had a couple of relationships with Christian guys, and they always turned out to be, in my opinion, horrible people. So I did always feel kind of like I was an outcast from the church. I always feel like I've always had that feeling, like I always was being judged by the church people. And I remember when I was in my early 20s, I ended up at a church with my then boyfriend, who is still my boyfriend now. It's been 16 years. But I remember the preacher in the classroom talking about faith. And I was in my early 20s, maybe 22. And he was talking about it's very important to have faith. And I questioned him, and I said, not in a malicious way, but I just questioned. I said, well, doesn't everybody have some sort of faith? Because everybody would be willing to sit in this chair, and they all have a different belief as to why they could sit in this chair and have this chair hold them up. And he said, if you don't want to be here, you can leave. And I really felt hurt by that comment, because I wasn't trying to pose that question to cause doubt within the classroom and with the other people there. I was just asking because I was trying to start an actual conversation where we could delve into spirituality in a free manner. And I felt like at that point the freedom of speech was cut off. And I do feel, looking back now at the Christian religion, that it is a very blindfolded religion. Keep your blinders on. Don't look left. Don't look right. And just, keep looking forward. And so he asked me to buy a tarot deck in my 20s. And at that point I was smoking weed, because I have 5 sisters and 1 brother. And my sisters they're all younger than me because I'm the oldest, but they were into weed because they were probably in the 18, 19, 16 years old, and I was about 20 or 21. And so I love my sisters, and I love them to death, and I still love them now. They're great. I love my siblings. All my siblings are cool, but my parents have always tried to push the Christian faith onto all of us. And out of the 7 kids that have come from my parents, I would say that maybe 2 of the 7 are still following consistently with the Christian faith, and the other 5, including myself, have gone on to just leave that behind and kind of follow our own path. But I became heavily involved with drugs with my current boyfriend, because at that time we were in our 20s, probably 20, 22, 23. And we were both at that point in our lives where we were going through a dark period, and so we did do drugs. And I never really liked doing drugs because I'm a really sensitive person, as I've said, and I always felt like when I would do the drugs, when I started doing weed, it was a very spiritual experience with my sisters, and weed never really gave me a big problem. But when I got into like harder drugs like ecstasy and speed and MDMA and stuff like that, GHB, I would always have really bad trips. And I mean, I guess I'm like any person. I used to watch a lot of horror movies, and I used to really like them when I was in that stage of life as well. And I remember I did go through a goth phase, and I was reading a lot of Anne Rice books, and I've never been a big book reader, but like I did love the Anne Rice books. And as I said, I was starting to get into astrology, and at that point I had some experience with the tarot. And I had a lot of anger towards the Christian religion, but from time to time I would still, you know, later on I would still from time to time go to church to please my parents. But I feel like this is getting to be a long story, but we're talking about shadow work here. So shadow work is when you delve into your past and you try to understand the darker aspects of yourself. And if you've seen any of my current this is a new channel, but if you've seen any of my current tarot readings, you'll see that I'm a very love and light person, and it's been a long road to get to this point. I was diagnosed as having psychoses. I've gone through a lot of stuff. I stayed in jail overnight one night because the police arrested me for something that I hadn't done, and so I ended up in jail, but they ended up like not charging me for anything because I wasn't guilty. So you know, that was a rough experience too, because I remember I went downtown to the police court, and they put me in like one of those actual like prisoner cars where you're at the back of the truck, and it's really, really small, and there's like a grate for the door, and it's like just metal inside. And I remember when I was in prison that night, I was sick. I was diagnosed with a mental illness, so I had my Doc Martens, and I was drawing pentagrams on the wall with the sole of my Doc Marten boots, and they took my boots away, and I was really cold that night, and I was like, I had my hands inside my t-shirt, and I was trying to stay warm, and finally, like, in the middle of the night, they finally gave me like this tiny red blanket just to like wrap over my like top self because it was really cold in the jail cell. And so then when I went to the court, they released me. But I had been to school, and I had started school in my early 20s because I wanted to be a nurse. So I got accepted into nursing school, and I guess because of the drugs that I had done, as well as the stress, because I had just moved out at that point with my boyfriend, and I had switched jobs in order to be able to make tips and make a little bit more money to support myself and live with my boyfriend in my 20s, that I had a break. I had a mental break. So they finally released me the next day after I was found not guilty of anything, and they released me in the middle of downtown Montreal, and they didn't give me any money to take a bus home to the West Island, and I had no money, and so I didn't know what to do. So funny thing is, I went straight to the Indigo and Chapters bookstore, and the first thing I did after I got out and I got there was I stole a deck of tarot cards, and I remember which deck it was. It was the Golden Tarot of Klimt tarot cards, and from there I ended up in the psych ward a couple days later, and I remember ripping up a Bible in the psych ward, and just if I could tell you the stories of the mental situations that I've gone through, you would understand why I have so much to say when it comes to love and light, because I've been through so much darkness that I feel like there is no more shadow work to be done, because I feel like all those shadows have just had so much light flooding into them through my exit from Christianity and my entrance into what I now call the Wiccan path that I'm on. So I'm on a Wiccan path of a year and a day. It's been a long ride. I was diagnosed recently with schizoaffective disorder, and I'm on medication to control that. I didn't end up becoming a nurse because I got sick, and I ended up in the psych ward for a month, like I said. So I dropped out of nursing school, and I couldn't get back in. So when I started getting on the right medication after I was in the psych ward for a month, I decided to go take a nursing not a nursing assistant. It could be a nursing assistant in the States, but it's basically the people that wash the patients, dress the patients, work in old folks care homes, change the diapers, help people go to the bathroom. So I took a year-long course because I couldn't become a nurse. So I took a year-long course to be able to do that kind of work. And finally, I did finish that because I had never finished anything in school. So when I turned 30, I went back to do that course, and I did finish the course after a year. And I did get a job at a nursing home, and eventually I got a job at the hospital a year after I worked in the nursing home for a full-time work for a year. And then when I got a job at the hospital, under the umbrella of the hospital, there is other nursing homes that are owned by the government. So I worked in another nursing home through the government for 3 years full-time until I decided to transfer to the hospital, which was nearby my home. And I have been at the hospital now for, I would say, 12 years. I've been working full-time at the same hospital. But like I said, I did just get diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder. And now that COVID has hit, it's been a lot of stress at the hospital. So I've taken some time off the hospital. And I've been having a lot of like anxiety issues with like going out into public and stuff like that. And I've really used this time to kind of like try to put some love and light out onto social media. So through this YouTube channel and through Instagram and through my podcast, The Intuitive Witch on Spotify, I've since purchased, you know, the Golden Klimt Tarot deck again, because I don't know where it went after I got into the hospital and ended up getting out for that month. But I can't say it's been an easy ride. Even recently, I was hospitalized again for another month, I think 4 or 5 months ago, into another psychiatric hospital, and the medication was switched to another medication. And like I said, that was when I was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder. And if you don't know what schizoaffective disorder is, it's schizophrenia and it's bipolar disorder together. So guys, if I could tell you my stories, I would, but I feel like they don't need to be said. I think the reason for this video is to show you what shadow work is. So if you feel like doing a video like this, to be honest with your followers on YouTube and to be able to allow them to understand you a little bit more. As I said, Fierce and Pretty made a video on shadow work. So ways that I have done shadow work has been a lot through the Wiccan path that I've been on. So I've created myself an altar space where I can go and feel like I can speak to my deities and to you know, source and the divine. I've connected with that dark side of myself. I've allowed myself to let Christianity go and to follow my own path. And that's why I made the video on Lucifer, the angel of light, because he is the first other entity that I looked into other than the Christian God. Because obviously if you're a Christian, what's opposite from Christianity? The devil. So I ended up going towards the devil. And even though I've always been told that the devil is a liar and that he hates human beings and that he's disguises himself as an angel of light to tempt people, and that he is going to hell, and that anybody who believes otherwise is going to hell as well. And I always questioned how such good people that I would meet who were homosexuals or transgenders and who had love interests other than heterosexual. I always questioned how these people could be so good and still weren't going to hell. So I never was able to make peace with the Christian religion in my heart. And so finally, now that I've realized that Lucifer is not, I did go towards Satan, and now I realize that through him, I was able to question adequately to find my way out of that lies of that Christian religion that had been like heaped on top of me from when I was a child. Because what I forgot to tell you was that when I was 6 years old and I was feeling afraid in my bed, my mother came into my room and she said that if I accepted Jesus into my heart, I would no longer feel scared at night. And I must say, I don't remember ever after that day if I was scared or not at night, but I did accept Jesus into my heart when I was 6 years old, and I'm 39 now. So if you can think about 33 years of dealing with the Christian religion and being a Christian has really caused a lot of difficulty in understanding the darker side, that shadow work that I was supposed to be doing. But I do believe that everything happens for a reason, and I do believe that tarot has really helped me to connect with the divine. And I've looked into a lot of other things like magic, spell work, excuse me, tarot, runes, pendulums, you know, witch runes, Nordic runes, like I said, spell work, whatever I wasn't allowed to do as a Christian, all that stuff that's considered witchcraft and that warrants a Christian going to hell if they do it. I've let go of that belief of hell. I don't even believe in hell anymore. Like, it's so funny because if you're out there and you're trying to transition from a Christian religion to a religion of freedom, which I would say that the religion of freedom is to question reality and to question beliefs. That is the true way to become free, is to be able to question. And so when you're transitioning from a religion that is so strict like Christianity, and you're not supposed to be questioning, I would often sometimes think to myself, what if I go to hell for this? What if I'm going to hell now because I'm no longer a Christian? And I do remember strongly feeling that if I would question these things, and if I would start to go down the path of witchcraft and being a witch, that I would go to hell. At certain times I would think, oh my God, I'm probably going to hell for this. And it was slowly releasing that toxicity from my system and that idea of hell from my system that I was so brainwashed to believe. But I just want to say that the shadow work is this. The shadow work is confronting your reality, speaking your story to yourself, and trying to understand how your path has allowed you to grow and where you are now. So, as I said, this video was inspired by the YouTuber Fierce and Pretty. I'm leaving it on the screen. Fierce and Pretty. If you want to check out her latest, I don't know if it's her latest video, but her video on shadow work and how the tarot has really helped her to delve inward. And I totally agree with her. If you are interested, even one little smidgen in the tarot, I would definitely recommend you find a tarot deck that speaks to you through its artwork and you delve into that headlong, because I've never had a psychologist, and I've never really had a psychologist. I've had a psychologist for a month at one point, and I do have a psychiatrist who prescribes me my medication, but I've never been able to really delve into healing myself until I picked up another tarot deck and studied the tarot and drew cards daily to kind of find out what I was supposed to feel in my heart and what the divine was telling me. So I love tarot, and I'm not just telling you this because I love tarot, because I could easily keep the tarot for myself and use it for my own good. But whatever means of divination, whether it be scrying through a crystal ball or scrying through tea readings or through smoke, whatever kind of means, I would say if it's interesting to you, go ahead and explore it, as long as you're not hurting anybody doing it. The only person you can hurt is yourself by sending yourself to hell, supposedly. So, you know what? Just go with it. Like, follow your instinct. That is shadow work. Shadow work is going into the darkest memories of yourself and finding out who you are and why you are who you are. So maybe this video has been boring for some people, and maybe they clicked out a long time ago, or maybe you've actually listened to this. This is just my testimony, and that's what they would call them in the Christian religion. They would tell people to share your testimony and how you came to know God and how you became a Christian. Well, this is my testimony of how I became the person that I am today and how I let go of Christianity in order to heal myself. So I'm sorry if you're a Christian and you're watching this and you want to tell me that I'm going to hell, because who's judging who here, if that's the case? Anyways, I don't believe in hell, so how could I go there? Anyways, for those of you who have taken some inspiration from this video, that's why this video was made. This video wasn't made to cause to cause an argument between me and those people who disagree with me. This video was made to share my story, which I find could be an inspiration for those who really want to understand it and grow in their own journey. And I really want to thank Fierce and Pretty for doing her video on shadow work, and for doing it. She's from Finland, and she said she has a problem speaking in English, but I think she did a really good job. So check out her video if you get a chance. Anyways, until the next video, peace. Jokes. Bye.